Rejected Omega helped the Alpha King's silent daughter speak while he watched from shadows, fighting tears. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to our main character. Elena Moore learned early how to make herself small without disappearing, a skill that kept her safe inside the vast stone corridors of Blackwood Palace, where footsteps echoed like judgment and whispers traveled faster than truth. She was an Omega without a pack name worth speaking aloud, assigned to quiet tasks that left no mark and earned no thanks. And tonight, she moved through the East Wing carrying folded linens measured neatly at 30 inches wide, counting each step to steady her breathing. The palace prepared for a diplomatic reception, chandeliers polished to a mirror shine, rugs aligned to the inch, and voices carried instructions clipped and precise, yet none were meant for her. Elena felt the familiar glances skim past, the unspoken rule that she should remain useful but unseen, especially near the royal family, especially near the child. The Alpha King's daughter lived beyond a tall oak door at the end of a sunlit hallway, a place guarded by silence more than locks, and Elena had been warned with tight smiles not to linger there, not to ask questions, not to hope. They said the girl did not speak, that she never had, and some said silence was safer, easier, a thing to accept and move around like furniture. Elena had learned to listen for what wasn't said, and as she laid the linens on a side table, she sensed the hush that followed the child like a held breath. From the corner of her eye she saw Lily Blackwood seated by the window, small hands folded, sunlight touching her hair, eyes bright with thoughts that never crossed her lips, and Elena's chest tightened with a gentle ache that surprised her. A steward's voice cut the air, reminding Elena to finish quickly, to keep moving, to remember her place, and she nodded without lifting her gaze. The palace smelled of lemon oil and old wood, of order and expectation, and Elena moved carefully, each motion soft, each step measured in inches, because noise invited notice and notice invited trouble. Yet something pulled her attention back to the child's quiet presence, not curiosity but recognition, as if silence had a texture she understood. Beyond the window, late afternoon light stretched the shadows long across the floor, and somewhere unseen the Alpha King returned to his residence. His presence felt more than heard. Elena gathered her courage the way she gathered her linens, carefully, knowing it could slip if held too tight. And as she turned to leave she caught Lily's gaze for a heartbeat, a simple exchange that felt like a question asked without words. Elena answered it the only way she knew how, with a soft smile and a promise kept inside, and she stepped back into the hallway where the palace resumed its measured rhythm, unaware that a quiet beginning had just found its place. Elena did not expect to be called back to the East Wing before dusk, yet a soft knock reached her while she was refolding cloth in the service room, and a young attendant with careful eyes told her the child had asked for her by pointing, by looking toward the hallway where Elena had disappeared, and by pressing a small hand to her chest, as if holding a word that did not yet know how to leave. Elena felt a flutter of uncertainty, the kind that came when rules bent without breaking, and she followed at a measured pace, counting steps again, the distance from the stairwell to the oak door a familiar 60 feet that now felt longer. Inside the room, the air was warm and still, sunlight dimming as clouds drifted across the sky, and Lily sat on the rug with wooden blocks arranged into quiet towers that rose and fell without sound. Elena lowered herself to a knee rather than standing over the child, careful to keep her hands visible and her movements slow, remembering how silence could be crowded if pushed too quickly. The steward hovered by the doorway, unsure, ready to interrupt, but Lily lifted her gaze, and the room seemed to settle, as if the walls themselves listened. Elena did not ask questions and did not offer instructions. She placed one block down, then another, leaving space between them, letting the rhythm of play breathe. Minutes passed measured not in words but in shared attention, the soft tap of wood, the steady hum of the palace beyond the walls. Lily nudged a block toward Elena, a small invitation, and Elena accepted with a nod, stacking carefully, stopping when the tower leaned, smiling when it fell. There was no applause, no correction, only the comfort of trying again. From the hallway, unseen, the Alpha King paused, his presence held in the angle of a shadow, his boots silent on stone as he observed a scene he had been told was impossible. He had learned to read rooms by the way others tensed, yet here he felt something loosen instead, a quiet spreading warmth that surprised him. Elena spoke only once, a whisper not aimed to be heard, describing the color of the sky outside and how clouds drifted like slow ships, and Lily's fingers stilled, her eyes following the imagined path. The child leaned closer, curiosity replacing the guarded stillness that usually kept others at a distance. Elena mirrored the movement, staying level, her breath even, her voice low and steady, not coaxing sound but offering safety. Time slipped by unnoticed until the steward glanced at the clock and hesitated, uncertain whether to intervene. Lily touched Elena's sleeve, a light brush that carried trust, and then pressed her palm flat to the rug, grounding herself. Elena responded by doing the same, a simple echo, and the room felt anchored. From the shadows, the Alpha King drew a slow breath he had not realized he was holding, his eyes fixed on his daughter's face as it softened, as if a door had cracked open to let light in. He did not step forward, did not speak, understanding that presence could be louder than intrusion. Elena gathered the blocks and placed them back in the box, each piece returned with care, signaling an ending without rupture. Lily watched closely, absorbing the pattern, and when Elena rose, she waited, patient, accepting the pause. At the door, Elena hesitated, offering one last gentle look, a promise without words, and Lily lifted her chin, eyes bright, as if to say she understood. The Alpha King remained unseen, his resolve shifting quietly, knowing that something essential had begun and that the palace, for all its order, had just learned how to listen. The next morning brought a change in the palace air that Elena felt before anyone spoke, a subtle tightening that followed her through the corridors as she carried a tray measured to 20 inches across with tea set precisely, saucers aligned, spoons facing east by habit. Word had traveled faster than footsteps, and glances lingered where they once slid past, some curious, some sharp with warning. The East Wing had its own rhythm, and Elena sensed she had disrupted it by simply being kind in the wrong place. When she arrived at Lily's door, the steward met her with a careful smile that did not reach his eyes, reminding her of schedules, of protocols, of the importance of consistency delivered like a fence rather than a guide. Elena listened and nodded, absorbing the rules without protest, knowing how easily access could be withdrawn. Inside, Lily sat with her book open to the same page as yesterday, a picture of a lighthouse rising from a calm shore, and Elena took her place on the rug at a respectful distance, mirroring the child's posture, letting quiet do the work. The minutes passed, steady and unremarkable, until another attendant entered with a soft cough and a firmer tone, announcing that the session would end early, that the child required rest, that the Omega's assistance was no longer necessary. Lily's shoulders stiffened, her fingers curling at the edge of the page, and Elena felt the small rupture like a tug at her sleeve. She rose without argument, keeping her movements slow, offering Lily a gentle nod that promised continuity even as it slipped away. In the hallway, voices followed, low and insistent, discussing liability and expectations, the way people talked around what mattered without naming it. Elena returned to her duties, the palace resuming its polished cadence, but the day seemed longer, every inch of stone pressing heavier underfoot. By afternoon, she was summoned to the service office where a supervisor recited concerns measured in calm words, explaining that familiarity could confuse a royal child, that boundaries existed for protection, that Elena should remember her role. Elena answered simply, agreeing to follow direction, her voice steady even as something inside her settled into resolve rather than retreat. She understood caution, but she also understood Lily, the way silence was not absence but a language waiting for patience. From the gallery above, unseen, the Alpha King listened to the same arguments framed in policy and precedent, his hands resting on the rail as he watched Elena pass below, her posture unchanged, her dignity intact. He recognized the pattern, the reflex to limit what could not be controlled, and it unsettled him more than open defiance ever had. Later, as dusk softened the windows, Lily refused her supper, pushing the plate away with small, decisive motions, eyes fixed on the door. The staff exchanged looks, uncertain, offering alternatives that went untouched, and the room filled with the brittle quiet of concern. The Alpha King stood at the threshold, weighing choice against custom, remembering the calm that had entered the room when Elena had been allowed to simply be present. He did not issue commands, did not raise his voice, but asked for space, a word that carried weight without force. When Elena was brought back, the tension eased like a held breath released. She did not hurry to Lily or break the stillness. She sat, placed her palm on the rug as before, and waited. Lily mirrored the motion, her gaze lifting, relief softening her features, and the Alpha King felt something shift again, not loud, not dramatic, but certain. In the quiet that followed, Elena understood the cost of being seen and accepted it, knowing that some bridges were built not by crossing them once, but by returning when it would be easier to stay away. By the third day, Elena understood the pattern that steadied Lily best, and it was not the toys or the books or the careful schedule measured in 15-minute blocks, but the way attention settled when no one demanded anything of her. The room had been rearranged subtly, chairs pulled back, the rug cleared, the window cracked open to let in the afternoon breeze that carried the clean scent of rain and stone. Elena arrived with nothing in her hands, no props to explain her presence, only herself, and she took her place on the floor at Lily's level, matching the angle of her legs, aligning breath to breath until the quiet felt wide instead of heavy. Lily watched closely, eyes tracking every small movement, and Elena moved slowly, tracing a circle on the rug with her finger, then pausing, letting Lily decide whether to follow. She did, a careful line drawn beside Elena's, and the circle became two paths that met without crossing. Elena smiled, not to praise but to acknowledge, and continued, tapping the rug twice, then once, setting a rhythm that asked without insisting. Lily hesitated, then tapped back, the sound soft and sure, a conversation built of timing rather than words. Elena shifted to the window and described the light in full sentences she did not expect Lily to answer, the way the sky turned silver when clouds passed, the way shadows stretched to touch the far wall, her voice even and unhurried, as if the words themselves were objects placed gently within reach. Lily leaned closer, curiosity drawing her in, her breathing slowing to match Elena's cadence. In the doorway, unseen, the Alpha King stood again in the angle of shadow he had learned to occupy, hands clasped behind his back to keep from interrupting what he could feel changing. He watched his daughter's shoulders lower, watched the tension ease from her jaw, and felt his own chest tighten with an emotion he had not prepared for. Elena placed her palm on her chest and said her name clearly, then pointed to Lily and waited, not filling the space when nothing came, trusting silence to be a bridge rather than a wall. Lily's lips parted, closed, parted again, a small effort that trembled and stilled, and Elena did not rush to rescue it. She nodded once, slow, encouraging without pressure, and returned her gaze to the light on the wall, as if to say there was time. A minute passed measured only by breath. Then Lily lifted her hand and touched Elena's sleeve, grounding herself the way she had learned, and tried again. The sound that emerged was soft and incomplete, more breath than voice, but it was shaped with intention, a beginning that carried weight. Elena did not react with surprise or praise. She simply mirrored the sound quietly, offering it back like a gift accepted and returned. Lily's eyes widened, recognition blooming, and she tried again, the sound steadier, closer to a word than it had ever been. From the shadows, the Alpha King turned his face away for a moment, fighting tears that threatened to break the careful control he had honed over years, pressing his fingers together until the feeling passed enough to let him watch again. Elena shifted back to the rug and tapped the rhythm. Once more, letting the moment settle into the room without claiming it, and Lily followed, a small smile breaking through as confidence replaced fear. When the steward appeared at the edge of the room, ready with caution, the Alpha King lifted a hand, stopping him without a word, understanding that this was not a thing to be managed but witnessed. As the session ended, Elena gathered nothing, changed nothing, leaving the room as she had found it except for the air, which felt lighter, as if it had learned how to carry hope. Lily watched her go, fingers resting at her throat, practicing the shape of sound in silence, while the Alpha King remained still, knowing that whatever came next would need to honor what had just been born without forcing it into display. The palace moved carefully around the change that followed, as if sound itself had learned to tiptoe, and Elena felt the shift in the way doors paused before closing and voices softened when they passed the east wing. Lily practiced in quiet moments now, not forcing sound but shaping breath, a hand at her throat, a fingertip tracing letters she did not yet speak, and Elena remained steady beside her, counting the small victories that did not need names. On the fifth afternoon, rain tapped the windows in a gentle pattern, each drop a soft punctuation, and Elena used the rhythm to guide their time together, tapping once on the rug, then twice, then waiting. Lily followed with a careful echo, her timing improving, confidence gathering like light behind clouds. Elena told simple stories about ordinary things, about the smell of wet stone and the way sidewalks glistened after storms, about how umbrellas bloomed on streets like dark flowers, words chosen for texture rather than instruction. Lily listened with full attention, eyes bright, and when Elena paused, she waited, trusting the space they had learned to share. From the corridor, the Alpha King stood in shadow again, not hiding so much as honoring the boundary he felt was necessary, his presence anchored by restraint. He had canceled meetings without explanation, delegated tasks with a wave, finding that the world beyond the oak door could wait while this could not. As Elena placed her palm on her chest and said her name again, Lily mirrored the gesture, her breath catching, lips shaping the sound with care. The attempt trembled, then steadied, and a soft syllable emerged, incomplete but unmistakably intentional. Elena nodded once, her eyes warm, and mirrored the sound back without correcting it, allowing it to be exactly what it was. Lily tried again, stronger this time, and the Alpha King turned his face away, shoulders lifting as he fought tears that rose without warning, the kind that come when hope insists on being felt. He pressed his hand to the cool stone wall, grounding himself, and counted to 10, then 10 more, until the room came back into focus. Inside, Elena shifted to the window and described the rain in full sentences, her voice a steady current, and Lily followed the cadence, breathing in time, then lifting her chin with a determination that made Elena's heart ache. The sound that came next was clearer, closer to a word than any before, and it carried the shape of a name, not perfect, not loud, but present. Elena did not clap or gasp. She placed her hand over Lily's gently, a quiet acknowledgement that respected the effort without overwhelming it. The steward appeared at the edge of the room, eyes wide, ready to call others in, but the Alpha King lifted a finger from the shadows, a small command that held the weight of law, and the steward froze, understanding that this moment was not to be displayed. Lily repeated the sound once more, softer, as if testing its safety, and then smiled, a smile that reached her eyes and lingered. Elena returned the smile and sat back, allowing the moment to settle into memory rather than spectacle. As the session drew to a close, Elena gathered her composure with the same care she brought to everything, rising slowly, offering Lily a nod that promised continuity. Lily reached out and caught Elena's sleeve, holding for a heartbeat, then releasing, her fingers warm with trust. The Alpha King stepped back into deeper shadow, wiping his eyes with the heel of his hand, breathing through the swell of feeling until control returned, knowing he had witnessed something sacred that could not be rushed or claimed. When Elena left the room, the palace seemed to exhale, and the Alpha King remained alone with his thoughts, aware that the quiet had changed shape and that whatever came next would demand courage of a different kind. The evening settled with a hush that felt intentional, as if the palace had learned to listen along with the child, and Elena arrived to the east wing carrying nothing but patience, her steps measured, her breathing slow. Lily waited by the window where lamplight softened the corners of the room, one hand resting at her throat, as if remembering a promise her body was learning to keep. Elena took her place on the rug without ceremony, aligning herself with Lily's line of sight, and began with what had become familiar. A gentle rhythm tapped against the floor, a pause that invited response rather than demanded it. Lily echoed the rhythm with care, her timing steady, confidence held together by the quiet that wrapped them both. Elena spoke in full sentences about ordinary things, about how the rain had rinsed the stone steps clean and left the air cool enough to notice, about how the lamps outside flickered once before settling, her voice a calm current that did not rush toward an outcome. From the hallway, the Alpha King stood just beyond the threshold, his presence contained within the angle of shadow he had chosen, his attention fixed on every small change, every breath that aligned, every inch of progress that no report could measure. Elena placed her palm on her chest again and said her name clearly, then waited, eyes soft, gaze unhurried. Lily mirrored the gesture, her lips parting, breath gathering, and the room seemed to hold itself still. The first sound emerged softly, shaped with intention, and Elena mirrored it back, careful not to correct or elevate it beyond what it was. Lily tried again, the sound steadier, closer to a word than breath alone, and Elena nodded once, acknowledging effort without applause. The Alpha King felt the moment crest and had to turn away, his jaw tightening as tears pressed forward, his hand bracing against the wall to keep the world steady while his heart surged. He counted his breaths, grounding himself, then looked again, unwilling to miss what was unfolding. Elena shifted her attention to the window and described the lamplight as it touched the glass, her words painting a picture Lily could follow without needing to answer. Lily's shoulders lowered, tension easing, and when Elena paused, she waited, trusting the space they had built together. Lily lifted her chin and tried once more, and this time the sound carried shape and meaning together, a simple word formed carefully, fully, spoken at last. It was quiet, barely louder than a whisper, but it landed with certainty, unmistakable and complete. Elena did not gasp or reach out. She placed her hand over her heart and smiled, a calm acknowledgement that honored the courage it had taken to arrive there. Lily watched her closely, eyes bright, and repeated the word again, stronger, the syllables finding their place as if they had always belonged. From the shadows, the Alpha King pressed his lips together and closed his eyes for a brief moment, fighting tears that fell anyway, silent and unashamed, his chest tightening with relief and gratitude that felt too large for words. He wiped his face with the heel of his hand and steadied himself, knowing that stepping forward now would fracture the safety they had built. Elena shifted back to the rug and tapped the familiar rhythm once more, grounding the moment so it would not overwhelm the child who had achieved it. Lily followed, smiling, her confidence anchored rather than scattered. When the steward appeared, drawn by instinct and hope, the Alpha King lifted a hand, stopping him without a word, protecting the quiet that had made this possible. As the session ended, Elena rose slowly and offered Lily a nod that promised continuity, without pressure. Lily reached out and touched Elena's sleeve, then her own throat, practicing the word in silence with a small, satisfied smile. Elena left the room with the same care she brought to everything, and the Alpha King remained in shadow, tears drying on his cheeks, knowing he had just witnessed a miracle born not of command or force, but of patience, respect, and love allowed to take its time. The following morning the palace gathered itself for routine business, yet an undercurrent of anticipation moved through the halls as if stone and glass carried news faster than voices, and Elena felt it when she was summoned to the council antechamber under the pretense of reassignment. She stood straight, hands folded, prepared for reprimand, for removal, for the careful language that made kindness sound like error. The doors opened wider than necessary, revealing the long table and its attentive faces, advisors measured in posture and expectation, and at the head stood the Alpha King, no longer hidden by shadow. He did not sit. He waited until Elena reached the center of the room, until the air settled, until the silence that had learned to listen held steady. He spoke her name clearly, without title or dismissal, and the sound of it carried weight, a recognition that turned curious glances into stillness. Elena met his gaze without defiance or fear, only honesty, the same calm she had brought to the rug by the window. He acknowledged the concerns voiced about boundaries and protocol, the risks of attachment framed as prudence, and then he said simply that results mattered when methods honored dignity. A murmur moved through the room and stilled when he lifted his hand, not in command but in clarity. He explained that his daughter had spoken, not because she was urged or displayed, but because she was given time, and he stated that such time would no longer be treated as indulgence. Elena felt the room tilt toward her, expectation pressing in, and she held her ground, breathing evenly, trusting the quiet she knew so well. The Alpha King did not praise her as a miracle worker or elevate her beyond herself. He named her patience, her restraint, her respect, qualities the palace claimed to value, yet rarely rewarded. He announced that Elena would continue her role by his authority, protected from interference, and that any future decisions regarding his daughter would prioritize safety over spectacle. The advisors nodded, some with relief, some with recalibration, understanding the line that had been drawn. From the doorway, Lily watched, small hand at her throat, eyes bright and steady. And when the Alpha King turned and extended his hand toward her, the room softened. Lily stepped forward, her steps measured, and took her place beside him, not hidden, not displayed, simply present. The Alpha King lowered himself slightly to her level and asked a question in a gentle voice meant only for her. And Lily answered quietly, a clear word shaped with care, the sound carrying across the chamber like a promise kept. Elena felt her throat tighten and kept her composure, understanding the importance of steadiness now. The Alpha King closed his eyes for a brief moment, emotion crossing his face without apology, and then he looked back to Elena with a gratitude that did not need ceremony. He dismissed the council, and the room emptied with respectful efficiency, leaving the three of them in the softened echo of what had just been decided. Lily reached for Elena's sleeve and spoke her name again, clearer than before, a simple truth placed between them. Elena knelt to meet her, nodding, smiling, keeping the moment grounded so it could last. The Alpha King watched them together, the line between ruler and father easing, and he understood that recognition was not a crown bestowed but a door opened, and that the quiet had finally found its voice without being asked to shout. The days that followed unfolded with a gentler pace, as if the palace had recalibrated itself around a truth it could no longer ignore, and Elena felt the change in the way her name was spoken without qualifiers and her presence was met with space instead of scrutiny. Lily practiced her words in moments that were not announced, testing sounds during breakfast when steam curled from mugs and sunlight warmed the table, trying again in the afternoon when the corridors hummed with distant work, each success grounded by Elena's calm acknowledgement rather than celebration. The Alpha King moved through his duties with a steadier focus, carrying the quiet with him like a compass. And when concerns arose from those who preferred certainty over patience, he addressed them plainly, stating that protection was not control and that progress did not require display. Elena continued as she had begun, arriving with nothing but attention, aligning herself at Lily's level, keeping rhythm and breath steady, letting words be invitations rather than goals. One evening, as the lamps were lit and the palace settled into a softer glow, Lily asked to walk in the gallery, her request shaped carefully, the words clear and deliberate, and the Alpha King felt his chest tighten with pride that did not need to be raised to the ceiling. Elena walked beside them at an easy distance, neither leading nor following, aware of how presence could support without overshadowing. In the gallery, portraits watched from the walls, histories rendered in paint and gilt, and Lily paused before one that showed a younger king with a guarded expression. She looked from the image to her father and then to Elena, forming a sentence slowly, choosing her words, saying that the room felt quieter now. The Alpha King answered with honesty, telling her that quiet could be strong, that listening was a kind of courage, and Lily nodded, understanding. Settling into her posture, a pair of advisors approached with a question framed in policy, but the Alpha King raised a hand and waited until Lily finished her thought, modeling patience without explanation. When Lily spoke again, clearer and confident, Elena smiled and placed her palm briefly over her heart, grounding the moment without claiming it. Later, in the antechamber, a concern was raised about appearances, about expectations that would follow such visible change, and the Alpha King responded with clarity that carried through the stone, stating that his daughter's well-being was not a narrative to be managed, and that Elena's role was secured by trust earned, not favor granted. The words settled the room, and Elena felt the weight of them as protection rather than elevation, a shield that allowed her to remain herself. That night, Lily practiced her words at the window, naming the moon and the light it cast across the garden, her voice soft but sure, and Elena listened without correcting, allowing ownership to take root. The Alpha King stood back, eyes bright, breathing steady, grateful for the restraint that had brought them here. As the hour grew late, Lily reached for Elena's hand and said her name with ease, then added a new word she had chosen carefully, calling her friend, and Elena felt the quiet bloom of acceptance that needed no ceremony. The Alpha King watched them together, understanding that recognition was complete when it protected without possession, and as the lamps dimmed, the palace rested in a calm that felt earned, the quiet no longer empty but full, carrying the promise of voices allowed to grow at their own pace. The final evening arrived without announcement, settling over the palace like a knowing calm, and Elena felt it as she crossed the gallery at an unhurried pace, the lamps casting a warm glow that softened the edges of stone and memory alike. Lily waited near the window, posture easy now, words resting comfortably behind her smile, and the Alpha King stood a few steps back, allowing the space that had taught them all how to breathe. Elena took her place on the rug and set the familiar rhythm with a single tap, then waited, letting Lily decide the next move. Lily answered with confidence, matching the beat, then added a word she had chosen for herself, naming the light, naming the quiet, testing how language could belong to her without being taken away. Elena listened with full attention, nodding once, honoring the ownership of each sound. The Alpha King watched from where he stood, no longer hidden, his presence steady and open, understanding that witnessing did not require command. Lily turned to him and spoke his name clearly, without hesitation, the words shaped by trust rather than effort, and he answered softly, pride steadying his voice. He knelt to her level and thanked her for her courage, not as a lesson but as truth, and Lily smiled, satisfied, then looked back to Elena with a certainty that felt earned. Elena met her gaze and placed her hand over her heart, acknowledging the bond that had formed without claiming it, knowing that some connections thrived best when given room. As the hour grew late, the Alpha King invited them to walk the garden path, the stones cool beneath their feet, the air clean and calm. Lily spoke as they walked, naming stars, counting steps in full sentences, laughter threading through her words, and Elena felt the quiet joy of work done well, without spectacle. At the garden's edge, the Alpha King paused and turned to Elena, his voice measured and sincere, stating plainly that she would remain at the palace by choice, not obligation, protected by trust and respect, her role defined by presence rather than rank. Elena accepted with a simple nod, gratitude steady, understanding that the offer honored her autonomy as much as her care. Lily reached for Elena's hand and said her name again, then added another word she had practiced, saying that she was glad, and Elena smiled, grounding the moment with calm rather than tears. The Alpha King looked at them together and felt the promise settle, a future shaped by patience and listening rather than force. As the lamps dimmed and the palace prepared for rest, Lily spoke one final sentence, quiet but complete, saying that tomorrow would be good, and the Alpha King believed her. Elena walked back through the halls with a lightness she had not expected, knowing that recognition had arrived not as applause, but as protection, and that the quiet she had honored had grown into a voice allowed to choose its own pace. Behind her, the Alpha King stood with his daughter, hands joined, understanding at last that true strength had been gentle all along, and that love, when it listened first, redeemed everything it touched.